cliff, and he had never really liked ladders, let alone trees, never having had to escape wolves before. So you can imagine how his head swam now when he looked down between the dangling toes and saw the dark lands opening wide beneath him, touching here and there with the light of the moon on a hillside rock or a stream in the plains below. The pale peaks of the mountains were coming nearer, moonlit spikes of rock sticking out of black shadows. Summer or not, it seemed very cold. He shut his eyes and wondered if he could hold on any longer. Then he imagined what would happen if he didn't. He felt sick. The flight ended only just in time for him, just before his arms gave way. He loosed Dory's ankles with a gasp and fell onto a rough platform of an eagle's eyrie. There he lay without speaking, and his thoughts were a mixture of surprise at being saved from the fire and fear lest he fall off this narrow place into the deep shadows on either side. He was feeling very queer indeed in his head by the time after the dreadful adventures of the last 3 days, with next to nothing to eat, and he found himself saying aloud, "Now I know what a piece of bacon feels like when it's suddenly picked out of the pan on a fork and put back on the shelf." "Oh, no you don't," he heard Dory answering, "because the bacon knows that it will get back in the pan sooner or later, and it is to be hoped we shan't. Also, eagles aren't forks." No, not a bit like storks' forks, I mean," said Bilbo, sitting up and looking anxiously at the eagle who was perched close by. He wondered what other nonsense he had been saying, and if the eagle would think it rude. He ought not to be rude to an eagle when you are only the size of a hobbit, and are in his eyrie at night. The eagle only sharpened his beak on one of the stones and trimmed his feathers and took no notice. Soon another eagle flew up.
The Lord of the Eagles bids you to bring your prisoners to the great shelf,"
he cried, and was off again. The other seized Dory in his claws and flew away with him into the night, leaving Bilbo all alone. He had just strength to wonder what a messenger had meant by prisoners, and to begin to think of being torn up for supper like a rabbit, when his own turn came. The eagle came back, seized him with his talons by the back of his coat, and swooped off. This time he flew only a short way. Very soon Bilbo was laid down, trembling with fear, on a wide shelf of rock on the mountainside. There was no path down to it save by flying, and no path down off it except by jumping over a precipice. There he found all the others sitting with their backs to the mountain wall. The Lord of the Eagles also was there, and speaking to Gandalf. It seemed that Bilbo was not going to be eaten after all. The wizard and the eagle lord appeared to know one another slightly, and even to be on friendly terms. As a matter of fact, Gandalf, who had often been in these mountains, had once rendered a service to the eagles and healed their lord from an arrow wound. So you see, prisoners had meant prisoners rescued from the goblins only, and not captives of the eagles. As Bilbo listened to the talk of Gandalf, he realized at last that they were going to escape really and truly from the dreadful mountains. He was discussing their plans with the great eagle for carrying the dwarves and himself and Bilbo far away and setting them down well on their journey across the plains below. The Lord of the Eagles would not take them anywhere near where men lived.
"They would shoot at us with great bows of yew, for they would think we were after their sheep, and at other times they would be right. No, we are glad to cheat the goblins of their sport, and glad to repay our thanks to you, but we will not risk ourselves for dwarves in the southward plains."
"Very well," said Gandalf. "Take us where and as far as you will. We are already deeply obliged to you, but in the meantime we're famished." "I'm nearly dead of it," said Bilbo in a weak little voice that nobody heard. Later on, you might have seen a bright fire on the shelf of rock, and the figures of the dwarves around it, cooking and making a fine roasting smell. The eagles had brought up dry boughs for fuel, and they had brought up rabbits, hares, and a small sheep. The dwarves managed all the preparations. Bilbo was too weak to help, and anyway he's not much good at skinning rabbits or cutting up meat, being used to having it delivered by the butcher all ready to cook. Gandalf, too, was lying down, after doing his part in setting the fire going, since Owen and Glóin had lost their tinder boxes. Dwarves have never taken to matches, even yet. So ended the adventures of the Misty Mountains. Soon Bilbo's stomach was feeling full and comfortable again, and he felt he could sleep contentedly, though really he would have liked a loaf of butter and better than bits of meat toasted on sticks. He slept curled up on the hard rock more soundly than ever he had done in his feather bed in his own little hole at home. But all night he dreamed of his own house, and wandered in his sleep into all his different rooms, looking for something that he could not find, nor remember what it looked like. End of chapter 6.